Welcome to Bake to the Future. The wholesale baking industry mixes tradition and innovation to feed the world and the economy, generating some major dough while employing nearly 800,000 people in the U.S. We bring you a fresh take on the latest trends and issues impacting the baking sector through exclusive insights and conversations. Brought to you by the American Bakers Association, who will take you bake to the future.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Haley Blumenreich.
And I'm Katie Jewell.
And welcome to Bake to the Future. Today we have another special episode on the coronavirus. And today we'll be talking with Kelly Knowles, who is the VP of State Affairs at the American Bakers Association. Welcome, Kelly.
Thanks, Haley. Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
Before we start our line of questioning and getting to understand what you've been working on recently, could you tell us where you are joining us from today?
Well, I'm joining you from my home office in Austin, Texas, in my closet.
Yes, we have found that that the closet does work best for a sound studio. I believe Haley and I are also both joining from closets today.
Yes,
yeah, I have a sweet 9-year-old daughter at home doing her remote studies and instructional learning, and a husband who's also working remotely. So these are unprecedented times.
Well, I wanted to talk to you. We talk quite a bit offline, but what we wanted this podcast to really do is to help our members understand what we've been working on, what's been important to you in your role at ABA. So why don't you take us back a few weeks and talk about what you do, how you've done it in the last few weeks?
Well, like I said, over this nearly 17 years I've been working for the baking industry at ABA, I've never seen anything like this. And it's hard to believe that it was just a couple weeks ago that everything really ramped up in terms of COVID-19. And my role at the ABA is focused around state affairs, which is a new advocacy resource for our ABA members, as well as our political affairs strategy and programs. And so both of those obviously were heavily impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, as was everything that we do at ABA. So since that time, my focus has been primarily around trying to help ABA members with resources on the state and local level. And if you look back to 2018, when the ABA Executive Committee, along with the ABA professional staff led by Rob, our president and CEO, went through the strategic planning process, one of the key components that resulted from that was the establishment of the state advocacy program for ABA, which I've been honored to help facilitate and lead for the organization. And while we started with a very narrow focus, which you and I have talked about over the last several months, and some of the success we've had on the state level in a very targeted way, it's just exploded with COVID-19. And we're talking about trying to help ABA members navigate, the state patchwork of regulations and rules and local ordinances and beyond. And so it's been terrific that we've had this put in place since 2018, but it's been a lot to try to digest as both a staff member and then, of course, the members at the state and local level.
And how we've been hearing a lot in the news about federal policies, but could you kind of explain to us why state and local regulations, why are they so important?
Well, that's a great question. The President of the United States, President Trump, has resisted in implementing a national shelter-at-home, shelter-in-place rule, much with a hat tip to the 10th Amendment, and that we're a strong states' rights country. And so as a result, President Trump has, left those decisions to the state and local level. And so I think right now we have about 42 states that have implemented shelter-in-place rules, but we have a handful of states who have not. And in those states where shelter-in-place rules are in effect, there's different rules about, who's considered critical infrastructure. And so it really becomes a patchwork of, what are the rules in this state versus another state. In one state, I may have to practice social distancing in my manufacturing facility, whereas in another state, we're considered critical infrastructure, and these rules and regulations that apply to the general public, we're exempt from. So, keeping up with all of the states and the various rules and regulations is challenging on an ordinary day. And so you add that into this national crisis, and it can be very cumbersome and confusing for members.
I guess I'm a little confused too. So you're saying, so I know that the baking industry is part of the food critical infrastructure, and baking food manufacturing is considered federally critical. You're saying that doesn't translate to states?
Well,
necessarily?
It does translate if the governor has recognized, the federal critical infrastructure guidelines, and most have. So I don't want to send out an alarmist bell that we're dealing with such a large variety of states that haven't. But there are states who have not recognized the critical infrastructure, and so ABA is working in part with a broader food industry coalition led by our friends at CBA, along with our other food and beverage industry partners, to reach out to those governors who have not identified or recognized the uniformity put down by the federal government for what is critical infrastructure, which will help bakers on the front lines just operate their business on a day-to-day basis.
Right, because I guess a lot of ABA members have facilities across state lines. Is that correct?
That's right. Many do. I mean, many operate in multi-states.
Have you heard any stories in particular, and you don't have to name any members by name necessarily, hearing from our folks and some of the pain points they've had?
Sure. Well, I mean, the pain points are pretty consistent across the chain of membership, whether it's a baking company or a supplier company. Our members are just working so hard to keep their employees safe, first and foremost. I mean, what I hear from members is my number one concern is keeping my employees safe and healthy during this crisis. And then beyond that, securing personal protective equipment for those employees, supporting employees in their effort to, go to and from home and work safely without getting pulled over. Other challenges about facing, uncertainty within the supply chain. I mean, this thing is just such a huge disruption to everyday manufacturing. I mean, specifically, to give you an anecdote, we've had some members who operate in Colorado implementing social distancing in the manufacturing plants and saying that employees have to remain 6 feet apart inside the bakery facility and other food industry facilities. And so, that presents an obvious challenge of how to get the work done if you have to stay, so far apart from another employee on the production line. And so working with partners, other food industry partners and then public stakeholders in Colorado to try to bring some common sense and practicality to, the situation, while also making employee health and safety our number one priority.
Yeah, it sounds like there's just so much to balance, and that given that baking is a critical infrastructure, it's just about finding that balance between making sure that employees are safe and also making sure that they're able to continue processing and manufacturing baked goods to get to the grocery stores and feed families.
That's right.
It has to be a challenge in this role to try and keep tabs on so many states. And we operate in all of the states, our members do. Maybe give a little peek behind the curtain. What is actually happening? Like, do we work with a network of folks? Are we relying a lot on partnership? Are you just working 30 hours a day? Or kind of how does that work?
Well, that's a good question. I think that, in terms of resources and going back to 2018, the ABA Executive Committee put in place, some resources for the association in terms of and budgeted, money for resources on state consultants and, a state pipeline of information. And that has been extremely helpful, as we've moved forward. Now, that was budgeted based on, day in and day out operations. So this is extended beyond. But I would say our partners in the food industry, in terms of the association in the DC space and beyond outside to state governments, have all come together to really help share information. I think Rob mentioned this on his podcast, just how great the food industry has come together to work to solve problems. And so we've leveraged a lot of those relationships on the state level and local level as well to try to help our members. But it's been a very challenging time.
So really what we're trying to do is, through multiple ways, we're really trying to kind of remove the red tape, kind of get out of the way, or, help remove obstacles for members, either who are really trying to pump out a lot of product, and I know a lot are, and we're also trying to remove hurdles for other members who might have challenges right now.
That's right, Katie. And I think along those lines of removing red tape and working with public and private stakeholders to try to solve problems for bakers, another way that ABA can be so helpful is to be, just a networking resource for idea sharing and best practices. And I know that through our State Affairs Working Group, which is comprised of ABA member executives who, work on the state and local level, they have been really great at sharing and going back and forth on what's working best at their companies. And so we actually have a call with those folks later today to kind of go through their feedback. And we always do a roundtable on the call, and they found it to be a great resource in terms of, even simple things like, how are you administering temperature checks at your bakery? Are you doing this? And where are you finding supplies for PPE? I mean, like I said earlier, the industry has really come together to try to solve these challenges.
That's really great to hear. And since this is Baked to the Future, what would you say is kind of like, what are you looking forward to in the future regarding the state patchwork regulations, and what kind of do you see is in the works or on the horizon?
Well, thanks, Haley. It's hard to know what the future brings after this crisis. As I mentioned when we started, in 17 years, I've really not experienced anything like this. I didn't work for the ABA during the 9/11 terror attacks, and I know that had a major impact on the economy and just consumer confidence. But trying to figure out and project, what is the economy, what are consumer perceptions going to be moving forward is really challenging. I mean, I know that the good news is many consumers have seemed to fall back in love with bread again, which we love, and bakery products and bread basket products. And hopefully the industry can capitalize that on that as much as possible. I think in terms of, if you look more on the granular level on state legislatures, many are not even in session right now, and with really unsure timelines on when they're going to reconvene. And those that do will likely be focused around budgetary issues and then post-COVID-19 implementations. And so a lot of the state legislation that we were tracking, for example, AB 5 in California, the gig economy bill, that has been very damaging to the baking industry, potential legislation in New Jersey that mimics that legislation in California has been put on the side table for now. And so the question will be, when will it return? But I do think, in terms of 2020 and the outlook, a lot of the focus will be around passing state budgets and then implementing COVID-19 implications.
I'd imagine it'll be a whole new slew of things that we'll need to look out for. So we really do appreciate you looking out for the industry. I'm certain that many of our members also appreciate the hard work that you do. And with that, we're going to come to a close with this episode. We encourage everyone who's listening to go to baketothefuture.org to see more episodes. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Bake to the Future is brought to you by the American Bakers Association in partnership with Human Factor. To hear upcoming and past episodes, go to baketothefuture.org. Bake to the Future is produced by Haley Blumenreich. Audio engineer is Blake Althen. And A Slice of the Action is written by the American Bakers Association's Government Relations team.